Hello, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter. Thank you for tuning into our channel, Goldilocks Global Banking News. Everybody knows that Goldilocks is the #1 source for the RVGCR. People from around the world tune in to see what Goldilocks is sharing on the RVGCR. Don't miss your chance and get your latest updates every day. So like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get your daily podcast from the Goldilocks articles on the RVGCR. Brought to you by Freedom Fighter.
Hey, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter, and welcome to Goldilocks Global Banking News. I am your host. Fine folks, let me tell you something. Goldilocks is sharing an update from Iraq. And expect when this podcast comes out, Goldilocks would have already shared an update from the CBI on something totally different, but just know right now what Goldilocks is sharing today shows that the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, remember there are 4 agencies that oversee the RVGCR because they oversee all of the currencies around the world. Number 1, the IMF. Number 2, the World Bank. Number 3, the Bank of International Settlements. Number 4, the U.S. Treasury. Goldilocks is sharing a report just recently by the IMF on Iraq, and a forecast on Iraq and their GDP, which is their gross domestic product. Let's jump right into what Goldilocks is sharing today from the IMF on Iraq. And before I get into this, let me tell you, today, if you're not aware, in the Goldilocks QFS Dialogues Room, Wiley and myself will have a brief call at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. This brief call today will be a sneak peek, sort of a prelude, if you will, a preview into the Saturday night dialogues call, which will be right here in the Goldilocks QFS Dialogues Room on Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we will provide you with information, not only on the latest updates with Iraq, Vietnam, and the whole entire RVGCR, but we're going to share some information that I'll say it would be in your best interest to attend the Saturday Night Dialogues call if you have purchased any of these so-called bonds. Just make sure, and you also can invite your lawyers to the call. Let's get into what Goldilocks is sharing today on Vietnam and Iraq. The IMF recently revised its GDP forecast on Iraq. And ladies and gentlemen, the forecast on Iraq by the IMF is greater than what they expected. Yes, Goldilocks is sharing. A country's gross domestic product, their GDP, has a direct and significant relationship with its currency exchange rate. As strong GDP growth can increase demand for a currency and strengthen it, while a weaker GDP can weaken the country's currency. The IMF report is showing a stronger expectation for Iraq and the DINAR. What Goldilocks is sharing is that this is because GDP, folks, is a key indicator of economic performance, and its growth influence factors like investor confidence, interest rates, and international demand for a country's goods and services, all of which affect its currency value. See, folks, A country's GDP, gross domestic product, it is how much profit after expenditures of a, just think of your paycheck. You have gross and you have net. Gross is what you, I want to say make, but it is what you make before taxes. Your net is what you take home. Make and take. Gross, make, net, take home. So a country's GDP is their gross domestic product. It's their gross salary for that whole entire country. Just like we showed you on last Saturday's call. The GDP for Zimbabwe was like $43 billion. Elon Musk's, his net worth is $444 billion. So if you think about it, Elon Musk's GDP is greater than Zimbabwe's GDP by a large amount. Literally 10 times. But that's another topic for another day. So Iraq, their GDP forecast by the IMF has been released in an update that happened on October the 22nd, which includes a significant upward revision. A significant upward revision to Iraq's GDP growth projections. This follows a more pessimistic outlook in April 2025, where the IMF had forecasted a lesser percentage of growth for Iraq. The latest estimates reflect improving oil market dynamics, higher than expected production stability, and modest non-oil sector resilience, which is key and important because Iraq must diversify their economy in order to help strengthen and provide the stability behind the Iraqi dinar versus solely depending on oil revenue. There are key highlights of this revision by the IMF on Iraq and the dinar. Their growth now is expected to be 0.5% versus 0.2% before. Inflation has gone down in Iraq. These changes position Iraq's economy for a more balanced trajectory, though growth remains below the 4% forecast from last year. What are the implications on the Iraqi dinar? Goldilocks shares that by stating the revisions broadly positive for the Iraqi dinar. It looks broadly positive. Why? Because these changes to the upward trajectory of their GDP and the downward pressure of their inflation boosts now the Iraqi economy, which boosts the confidence in the reserves in the Iraqi dinar. Iraq's currency stability, so the dinar's stability, is tightly pegged to the US dollar from the Central Bank of Iraq, with reserves currently over $100 billion. Serving as their primary buffer or their kitty, their piggy bank, if you will, in Iraq and their central bank. Inflation control that they've been able to have has strengthened the Iraqi dinar. Their illegal parallel market has been crunched. So in summary, the IMF is stating that the IMF's upgrade to Iraq's numbers signals a stabilizing environment in Iraq that should bolster the dinar's confidence around the world, and limit depreciation risk, meaning limit the devaluing of the dinar, which folks will potentially pave the way for minor strengthening if oil holds steady. Because you got to remember, oil is Iraq's number one revenue source. So Goldilocks is also sharing about tariffs when it comes to Vietnam, and recently this tariff agreement with the U.S. In export-driven economies like Vietnam, remember, export-driven, meaning that a country mainly exports, ships goods, products, and services out of their country that they make inside of it, ship them out all over the world. That's Vietnam. And their tariff reductions on exports can exert upward pressure on the Vietnamese dong. This occurs through various channels, such as increased export demand and trade surplus. Increased export demand, folks, meaning that more people, more countries, I should say, more investors will be pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into the Vietnamese economy, increasing exports, which now Vietnam is leaning more towards utilizing the Vietnamese dong in trade, so it will put great pressure on the dong and its value. With Vietnam's existing $123 billion trade surplus with the U.S., this amplifies inflows of foreign currency, primarily the USD. This creates balance of payment and pressure. Greater export earnings improve the dong. Vietnam's currency, the Vietnamese dong, is managed by the Central Bank of Vietnam. However, they are releasing more control and allowing market forces to eventually move the rate while the central bank manages afloat. Quote, 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 in the New Deal, meaning the New Deal with the U.S. on this trade and tariff, in the New Deal, the United States will maintain its tariff rate on Vietnamese goods at 20%, but will indefinitely and identify products where the levy of tariffs can be reduced to zero, end quote. In the coming weeks, the United States and Vietnam will work to finalize the agreement on reciprocal, fair, and balanced trade, preparing the agreement for signature and undertake domestic formalities in advance of the agreement entering into force, the statement said. In summary, Goldilocks is stating that these zero tariff provisions that the U.S. put on Vietnam will likely create conditions for the dong to appreciate in value by enhancing export competitiveness and trade imbalances. But Vietnam's central bank management will determine the extent, favoring controlled stability over sharp moves to protect exporters. We will monitor the Central Bank of Vietnam's announcements with the U.S. Treasury and reports on their final agreement in the next few weeks. The status of the trade deal with Vietnam. They've agreed upon their framework as of October the 26th. The role of exchange rates in these negotiations is very important. The role of exchange rates in these negotiations are very important. Goldilocks is stating exchange rates or more precisely, currency valuation and manipulation policies, are not explicitly part of the remaining details to be negotiated in this trade deal. The framework announcement and related reports make no reference to currency provisions such as commitments to avoid devaluation, exchange rate transparency, or monitoring mechanisms. The focus remains on tariffs themselves, market access, and non-tariff barriers. That said, exchange rates could indirectly influence the deal's implementation between the U.S. and Vietnam. This is where we monitor and watch for the markets to react. And President Trump's new signed deal with Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia, which are in the same region with Vietnam, those deals will affect the Vietnamese dong as well. This is where the residual effects, the ripple effects of these trade deals and these tariff negotiations will come in. This is where Trump, in his wisdom of understanding of how to create a fair currency environment of leveling the playing field, because currency revaluation was likely to be a priority of the second Trump administration, due large in part to the overvalued dollar and the trade deficit. But weakening the dollar can have large effects on this. And we are seeing all of this through trade and these tariffs. This is where it all begins. For those that have been following Goldilocks, you know this. This is nothing new to you. This is in addition to what you've already known. And the best is still yet to come. Be well, beautiful folks. We love you. Ciao.
Hello, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter. Thank you for tuning into our channel, Goldilocks Global Banking News. Everybody knows that Goldilocks is the #1 source for the RVGCR. People from around the world tune in to see what Goldilocks is sharing on the RVGCR. Don't miss your chance and get your latest updates every day. So like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get your daily podcast from the Goldilocks articles on the RVGCR. Brought to you by Freedom Fighter.